Hi friends, welcome to my YouTube channel SS Analysis. First of all, I would like to tell you that if you are watching this video first time, subscribe my channel to see my more upcoming videos on analysis of different commodities and equity indices. And second important thing is to watch this video till its end to understand this solely to take your decision. Your one like will motivate me to be regular in working more hard for you. Let us start the day to analyze the movements of S&P 500 futures in different time frames. So friends, Wall Street major indices fell from record highs on Friday. There is no doubt that after a sudden steep fall during the last week, most of the global equity indices witnessed a steep reversal from their lower levels when the European equity indices showed high opening on Friday due to ban on short selling by the Italy and Spain. But I find that this reversal shown by the global indices has generated a plethora of questions among the investors, as here you can see a monthly chart of S&P 500 futures. Here you can see that how the S&P 500 futures touched the lows of 2394 on Friday. We have seen a good reversal when the S&P 500 futures successfully closed at the levels of 2684, but I find that this reversal looks evident enough to enhance the volatility in S&P 500 futures during the upcoming week, because it has already tested the lows of 2394, where I find that it has tested new lows of this season. Here I find that the current position of moving averages looks evident enough to continue a downward trend in S&P 500 futures during the upcoming weeks. So let me zoom this portion for you. Here you can see that how the 20 days exponential moving average has turned downward and trying to come below the 20 days moving average, and 50 days exponential moving average is also turning downward, which is likely to come below the 50 days moving average. And I find that the overall trend may look bearish once we find a gap down opening of the S&P 500 futures below the levels of 2617, where the S&P 500 futures may test the lows of 2477, where I find that the S&P 500 futures may take a bounce back from these levels. But I find that there are some important levels for the S&P 500 futures which will have to be defended by the S&P 500 futures during the upcoming week. And I find that during this journey, the S&P 500 futures will have to defend the immediate support at the levels of 2626 before moving more downward. Here I find that the immediate support of S&P 500 futures will be provided by the 50 days exponential moving average, which is currently at the levels of 2617, and below this one more support will be provided by the levels of 2582, where the 50 days moving average will provide sufficient support to S&P 500 futures. On the other hand, if the S&P 500 futures find a gap up opening above the levels of 2722 and sustain above the levels of 2727, we will see the S&P 500 futures to test the levels of 2862, where a tough resistance will be provided here to S&P 500 futures during the upcoming week. So friends, here I find that once again the rallies will be sold on every upward move, but if the S&P 500 futures are not able to defend the immediate support at the 5-day low during the upcoming week, we will see the S&P 500 futures to take sharp downward moves, where the levels of 2727 will provide a tough resistance to S&P 500 futures. But here I find that the S&P 500 futures may find a strong support below this level what they tested on last Friday. One more support is here at this level, at the levels of 2336. Here the S&P 500 futures once again may take a bouncing move from these levels, but I find that during the month of March, we'll find the S&P 500 futures will be struggling to defend the levels of 2424. Friends, this is a monthly chart of S&P 500 futures which I prepared during February 2019 in order to calculate the technical formations before the financial crisis of 2008, where I find that the S&P 500 futures have once again tested the upper end of this uptrend zone what they tested just before the crash of 2008. Here you can see that this red line is the highest resistance level where the S&P 500 futures broke this immediate resistance in a monthly time frame. The S&P 500 futures tested the levels of 3354 on December 20th, 2019, and once again the S&P 500 futures made another futile attempt to break these levels and tested the highs of 3385, but here sharp sell-off was there since February 20th. We can see the beginning of a downward trend where I find that this line provides a tough resistance to S&P 500 futures because the S&P 500 futures could not sustain above this upper line where the S&P 500 futures witnessed an advent of a downward trend since February 20th, 2020. And I find that this downward trend may continue during the upcoming weeks where the S&P 500 futures have already tested the lows of 2394 on last Friday, where I find that the S&P 500 futures tested the strong support levels of this downward trend, where I find that the S&P 500 futures will once again try to break this level during the upcoming weeks. Therefore, I find that this reversal was only a technical bounce, and secondly, the resultant effect of ban on short selling by Italy and Spain. Here I find if the S&P 500 futures break this important support levels at 2348, we'll see the S&P 500 futures to take a sharp upward move where they may enter amid this zone where we will see the S&P 500 futures to test this range. I will call it the lower zone of this downward trend, where you can see that a downward move below this red line will enhance more selling pressure in S&P 500 futures, where I find that the movements of S&P 500 futures during the month of April and May amid this zone from the levels of 2101 to 2202 will result in more downward moves in the S&P 500 futures, where a breakout below the levels of 2040 will result in a meltdown not only in S&P 500 futures, but it will create a global equity meltdown. During the month of June 2020, we will see the S&P 500 futures to break the levels of 2020, which will result in a market crash in July 2020. So friends, be ready to see extremely volatile sessions in S&P 500 futures during the upcoming week, because I find during the upcoming week we'll see extremely volatile moves between the levels of 2525 to 2727 on the upper side, where I find that every upward rally will be sold from these resistance levels, where you can see these resistance levels in the yellow color. Here I find that this level will provide stiff resistance on an immediate bounce on the first trading session of the upcoming week, where I am expecting a gap down opening below the levels of 2626 on the first trading session of the upcoming week. So friends, let us see the movements of S&P 500 futures in a weekly time frame. So friends, here you can see the movements of S&P 500 futures in a weekly time frame, where you can see that the S&P 500 futures beats the 200 days moving average support on Friday, but we have seen a good reversal from here, but still the S&P 500 futures have seen a closing below the steep resistance level, which is at the levels of 2719, where I find that these levels will provide stiff resistance in case of any upward move during the upcoming week, where I find that the S&P 500 futures may try to break this immediate support of 200 days moving average, which is currently at the levels of 2639. But I find that during the upcoming week, if the S&P 500 futures break this immediate strong support of 200 days moving average, I find that a sustainable move below the levels of 2626 will enhance the bearish sentiments in the S&P 500 futures, where the S&P 500 futures once again will try to break the levels of 2395 during the upcoming week, and below this level the S&P 500 futures may take a good support from these levels, from the levels of 2355, where a strong support level is present, but if the S&P 500 futures remain unsuccessful in defending this strong support level of 2363, we will see the S&P 500 futures to test the levels of 2273, where I find that till the end of March 2020, we will see the S&P 500 futures to remain below the levels of 2387. If this is the case, we will see the S&P 500 futures to enter into the extremely bearish zone below this red line, which is currently at the levels of 2233. If till the end of March 2020, we will see the S&P 500 futures to make a move below the levels of 2233, we will see the S&P 500 futures to test the levels of 2041, from where the S&P 500 futures may take steep upward move back up to the levels of 2393, where the S&P 500 futures may find this level to be a stiff resistance level if they make a reversal from these levels. So friends, I find that any step out of this zone, I mean this circle, will result in continuity of this downward move during the upcoming weeks. So friends, be ready to see an action in S&P 500 futures. If you like this video, don't forget to share this video with your more and more friends. Thank you.